Data Storytellers, we are here again with an episode, and this is a long anticipated one. And we actually had a similar conversation yesterday with the guest, and now we're gonna, I guess, just dive right back in and explore it from all different angles. The guest today is Mikel Davis from Peacock, and it's my pleasure to have her on the show. Mikel, welcome.
Hi, I'm super excited to be here.
Fantastic. So, look, before we explore your career journey, which I found fascinating, we're going to talk about analytics in sports, analytics in filmmaking, and all that. It's a very dynamic space today, data and analytics, right? So, even when you and I started chatting, I think it was just over a year ago, you joined us in Nashville. We had some great conversations. A lot changed since, right? So from your perspective, like how do you see all these changes in the industry and what's different to what it was, let's say, even, 2, 3 years ago from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the biggest change that's the buzzword right now is AI. I feel like in the past year, you can't really talk about data without hearing AI, and every data and analytics conference has to have the theme of AI in it. So I feel like, and since the difference is AI is becoming such a cornerstone in the conversation nowadays, but in a way that it feels very familiar is how it reminds me of the introduction of data and analytics, 10, 15 years ago, where people were just like, oh, we have to have data, but no one really understood how to use the data. They just knew that we had to have it. Similar with AI, everyone's talking about AI. We have to introduce AI into our organization, but there isn't much context around, why do we need to have AI? How should it be used? So I think that's really interesting how I'm seeing this conversation happen again. And I'm excited to see how AI just shapes the future, similar to how traditional data and analytics has shaped the future.
Absolutely. And just today, we had a conversation on LinkedIn. One of our advisory board members, Elon, shout out to Elon. He's been on the podcast a few times. You guys actually met on the advisory board session as well. He shared out that article that I wrote based on, the 100 plus conversations I've had this year with data analytics leaders in Fortune 1000 and other major global enterprise organizations, and some of the key takeaways from that. And one, I think, comment popped up around how it seems to be that the data literacy conversation is getting rebranded into an AI fluency conversation, right? So it seems to be
Yep.
almost like a more attractive proposition that, hey, let's make the organization data literate, right? To, hey, let's make them AI fluent. And ironically, the latter builds on the former, right? So you cannot really have that AI fluency without proper data literacy. So it's a fascinating thing to watch unfold. And I don't know if I actually told you this when we spoke yesterday, that how I got into this whole business analytics game was through data-driven marketing. So first, after the army, I worked with senior marketers from big companies working on executive communities, bringing them together to exchange ideas and best practices, kind of similar to what we do in the data storytellers. And the buzz at the time, so we're talking 2014, right? It was data-driven marketing. That was the next big thing. So it was digital transformation and then data-driven marketing. And funnily enough, we had this executive program rolled out focusing on data-driven marketing. And we just had a hard time getting marketing directors on it for some reason, right? So everyone said that, yeah, that's the next thing, but everyone was a little bit hesitant about leaning into it fully. But then the people that we actually brought onto the course, and it was a huge success, were leaders of data and analytics, right? So I kind of found the marketing intelligence community first, and then from that it was the business analytics community, which is right up my alley. I come from specifically reconnaissance and military intelligence, so that was like a
Very,
perfect fit.
very cool.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a perfect fit for me, right? And I do remember that at that time, data analytics was still something that most people haven't even heard about, right? So it was just kind of up and coming. And I see something similar happening with AI, but almost like more profound, right? Because this whole data analytics conversation has been slow cooking since the 80s, since people started to gather information and data and spreadsheets and all that. But AI seems to be almost like a culmination of it, right? So Gen AI was the spark that lit everything on fire. And I see this big transformation happening now where, data kind of not even like taking the back seat, but more like almost in support of building something greater. I mean, AI is a data-driven technology. That's what it is ultimately, especially as we understand it today, mainly with this large language model, development. Essentially, the data is now moving from the back end to the front end when the users can interact with it directly. And I see this more as like I told you yesterday, that it's an AI bubble, but it's more like a dot-com bubble than, let's say, the crypto bubble was, right?
For
So
sure.
it's less of a passing trend, I think. It's still bubble in the sense that the market forces behave in a certain way when something big happens at the magnitude of the industrial revolution. So I look forward to seeing how this shakes out. And
Same
with this,
here.
yeah, right. And then, well, okay, so with this long-winded intro, I'd love to understand as we're talking about the past decade and going back. So, can you just tell us just a few words about what you do now, and then I would love to explore how you got into data analytics to begin with, and we can kind of go from station to station of how your journey developed.
Yeah, of course. So right now I lead strategic analytics, and part of my charter is really focusing on providing information to the executive leadership team to inform how the overall business is performing. So understanding, are we hitting our goals? Are we missing our goals? And trying to dig into the why behind everything that's happening to make sure that we're growing in the most effective way possible. And another area that my team leans into specifically is understanding customer behavior. So we do a lot of work related to customer segmentation to inform various strategic initiatives that we have across the organization. What I do within the TV and streaming world is really digging in to understand like what are folks' behaviors, both like within our walls as well as outside from a competitor landscape to make sure that we're positioning ourselves well for future growth. If I was to say it just in quite a few words.
Awesome. And I definitely talk about, how you got there, but how did you get into data analytics to begin with? Everyone has a different story about this, and I always love to hear what was your thinking and how did you join this community?
Yeah, honestly, I really just fell into data and analytics when I started undergrad. I've always been good in like the math world. I loved analyzing data and problem solving just naturally. And when I went to university, I opted for engineering because that was one of the main careers where you're using science and math and things like that. And I quickly learned that I did well in my math courses, but not so well in the science courses. And I kind of stumbled upon statistics, and then that worked out well. And then I took a few econ classes just for fun. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So I ended up graduating from my college with a dual degree in economics and statistics. And I didn't know it at the time, but when I look back on it, that's essentially an analytics degree. And now that I'm thinking about where we are today in the world and how so many universities have degrees in business and analytics, master's degrees in business and analytics, I think it's so cool. I really just fell into the analytics space just due to my interest in econ and stats. And when I first got an internship at American Greetings, it was in 2009, I believe. So again, in the early infancy of data and analytics and thinking about using data to drive business decisions, I thought it was really cool. I actually started in marketing, similar to you, where I was using stats and writing SQL code to help A/B test different digital marketing strategies. And I thought it was so cool that I was able to take specifically what I was learning in school and apply it to business. So that's where the passion really started within the analytics space, where I kind of not tied into, but kind of like tapped into an area that I love, which is math and data. And then quickly learned that there was a career out there, that it was a budding career, was a newer thing, and it was just really fun for me.
So I know that we talked about this yesterday, but this whole mix of economics and statistics being essentially an analytics degree. So this is such a cool thing because at the time there was no analytics degree. I mean, even today, I guess there's no like specific business analytics degree. You can probably, explore that and learn that in MBAs. But I wonder what today would be the equivalent of this. So I actually wrote an article like a couple of weeks ago called "The Rise of the AI Executive," which is just basically what we're seeing on the front lines now of how there's this like kind of new professional emerging who is the AI consigliere in the business, the AI advisor who understands the technology, but to the degree where he or she is able to navigate that landscape. But at the same time, this person is really good at building relationships, something that we'll talk about today, understanding organizational cultures, adoption and all that. So I wonder what is the equivalent to that economics plus statistics combo today for the future professionals, right?
Yeah, I would have to think about that. Nothing
I
is
mean, it's
top of
hard to.
mind for me right now.
I mean, we can only see in retrospect, right? Hindsight 2020 with that one. So that's awesome. And then basically, how did you, from American Greetings, what was your next step? And then at some point, you did start working for the Cavs, right?
Yes, this is true. So, all right, the journey of my career, it's a pretty interesting one. So, like I mentioned, American Greetings is where I got that initial spark of, oh, this data analytics thing, it's kind of cool. But I wasn't sold on it yet. I was a senior and not senior, well, senior, gosh, what do you say in college? I'm so tired. It's early in the morning right now. It was my last year of college. And I was like, let me just figure out what else is out there. So I ended up working in tech consulting at Accenture for a couple years, and I did the traditional Monday through Thursday travel. I worked from New York and Ohio and Virginia. So it was really cool to work for a lot of different clients. But throughout that experience, when I landed into various analytics centric roles, those are the ones that I really liked a lot. So long story short on that is first sparked the interest in first sparked the interest in data while working at American Greetings. And then I was like, okay, not sold on it, went to Accenture, became sold on it through the various projects that I had where I actually enjoyed analytics and I didn't enjoy the other projects that I had. And at that point, I knew I really wanted to pursue a career where I could do something in data and analytics, but it was also really important for me to do it in a fun industry that I found exciting. So at the time, I was really pursuing careers in music and analytics. My dream job back then was working for Pandora, but that didn't pan out for me. Instead, I ended up finding a really cool home at the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I really enjoyed my time there. I was one of the first members of the analytics team there, and at that time, similar to what we've been talking about, the analytics space was very new. It was familiar from the concept of the Moneyball film that came out and the concept of using data to inform the baseball operations side. So how do you acquire talent efficiently? And it was pretty new at the time to use data to help drive business. So what I was hired to Cavs to do was use data to help drive revenue for the organization through ticket sales and sponsorship sales.
So this is actually even talking about Moneyball. There's the coach of the Boston Celtics, Joe Mazzulla. As I was writing down Boston coach, I'm like, what's his name? Because it's morning for me too. We're in the same time zone here on the West Coast. Joe Mazzulla, and I don't know if you know the story. They won the championship last year in 2024, and he's huge into analytics. He is actually called the analytics guy of basketball. So I remember watching Moneyball for the first time, and I kind of missed it. I think in general, it's just I did not connect the dots with it at the time. I think probably it came out before I got into the whole analytics game. But it's a fascinating story and a fascinating concept, right? Of how can you basically observe what's happening on the court on the level of the hard data points or on the pitch, right? And how can you make informed decisions based on that? So sports is one of those areas where it's actually going through a revolution today. Everyone has been talking about, looking at the stats and the data, but now with advanced technology becoming available, they can pull all kinds of new insights out of that. So before we dive into your time at the Cavs, I'm sure there's a lot to talk about, just based on even yesterday's conversation. But you mentioned music and Pandora, so I wanted to ask you. Even after yesterday, I was thinking. So I do remember Pandora, but only vaguely. It's a crazy thing. Right now, we're thinking Spotify and Apple Music.
Yeah.
What was Pandora's deal? So what was the thing about Pandora? What was the service itself?
Yeah, so Pandora is a music streaming service focused on the radio aspect. So they were really focusing on optimizing, creating stations based on various artists that fit a particular genre that was related to like similar content that you would want to hear. So I feel like I didn't work for Pandora, but in my mind as a user, I felt like their goal was to create a station where you would never want to turn that station off because everything you're hearing, it really resonates and it's in the mood that you're looking for right now. So I know for sure they had to be optimizing a lot of various statistical models in order to predictively know the next title to play that would make that person want to continue listening on the platform. And I just thought that was really cool because like I mentioned at American Greetings, I was like, oh, wow, I can apply like me learning the SAS code to like working for a company. Similar with Pandora, in the back of my mind, I knew they had to be building these crazy models where I could use my SAS code to, build these models to, help someone's listening experience.
This is fascinating. This was before iTunes, right? I mean, I guess they did
But
start
maybe
before
around the same time.
around. Yeah, because you see, we talk about hindsight 2020. So no one would have been able to tell before iTunes, and probably even after, soon after iTunes, that will end up in this landscape today where you have the streaming platforms that everyone is listening to music either on Spotify, Apple Music, or YouTube Music. That's basically it, right? That the
Yep.
CDs will go away, that no one will really listen to radio anymore, but because we existed in that paradigm, that music comes to the radio, right? The idea of, hey, how can we digitize this whole thing? How can we make it better? Still thinking in those concepts of, well, we're just gonna, mix together like the school radio station for you. But then
Mhm.
iTunes was really the thing that broke the entire machine, right? Of, hey, now you can buy a song for $1, a song for $1. That was the big idea that actually ended up
Yeah, for sure.
being
And then with
what we have
iTunes,
to
is
do.
you can buy for $1, and now they have radio stations of their own, and now you're paying like $9.99 for a month. So you're not just buying a single track; you're buying like the entire library that they have. So it is really cool to see how it all has been transforming over time.
Absolutely. And imagine if during that time, before iTunes, someone would have said that, hey, unlimited music for $9.99 a month, right? It's like
They would think you were crazy.
they would think you were crazy. And if you probably pitched that idea as a startup, the VCs would have laughed you out of the room, right? Kind of like
For
how
sure.
Uber was struggling to get investment when they rolled out that idea, right? I mean, Mark Cuban basically rejected the offer to invest in Uber early days, right? So,
Crazy.
um, yeah. Fascinating conversation. So, with the Cavs. So I know that you were actually at the Cavs during the time when LeBron came back, right? So can you just talk about that
That's
a little
right.
bit? Like what was the atmosphere at the time? And you are also from Cleveland.
I am from Cleveland, so much love for LeBron and all of Northeast Ohio. And it was really special for me to be able to get the job at the Cavs and work for such a cornerstone of the Cleveland community. That it was a really great experience for me from all the way around. But yes, I was there for LeBron's second time at in Cleveland, and it was like you can't words really can't even describe that experience. I was there for a couple years before he came back in the low demand season, and then I was there when he came back in the high demand season, and it was just remarkable the impact that one person can have on an entire city. But if I speak to just like the experiences is it's interesting when you think about from a business perspective. trying to sell out an arena in a low demand situation, and how do you maximize revenue in a low demand situation compared to how you're trying to maximize revenue and sell tickets in a high demand, where in a low demand situation you're not selling out the arena, so you're really figuring out how can I discount tickets, how can I create ticket packages, how can I create these cool experiences to encourage people to come to the arena. And that was a really fun learning experience from a business perspective. And then, once LeBron came back, it's a really interesting story here where he came back in 2014, and at that time, like the day that he announced that he was coming back to the Cavs, I was in Vegas on vacation. But during that time, I was working on building out a model to help predict those folks who would be likely season ticket holders for us, to try to sell more tickets. And he made the announcement, then all the season tickets sold out. It got announced publicly, and I'm on vacation. I was just like, all right, well, if my job is to figure out how do we sell out tickets and all the tickets are sold out, do I have a job? Needless to say, I did still have a job, but what I focused on was a little bit different. So in high demand situations, it's more about like, how do you maximize revenue? So there's a fixed number of seats in the arena. So it's not about how do I fill up all the seats, it's how do I get the most money out of those seats. And that's why you see all the ticket prices raised. And then, so at that time I was focusing on like pricing, and as well as started to transition more into sponsorship sales, and being ambitious and branching into other areas too. So since there was less of a need to figure out that low demand scenario for pricing, me being the ambitious person that I am, I started digging into like other parts of the organization, talking to the marketing folks. I started to introduce concepts like we were talking about earlier, digital marketing, A/B testing. It was early days, so it was pretty foreign back then. So kicked off digital marketing and testing there. So LeBron coming back had an interesting influence on my own personal life as well. It kind of transitioned all the work I was doing into completely different areas, but it was really, really fun.
That's awesome. I mean, the story when LeBron almost drove you out of business, it looked like it, but, but then actually what happened was he gave you a bunch of new cool opportunities to work on. And um, so that must have been awesome. And then what made you decide to move on and find new analytics pastures in a different industry?
Yeah, so the reason I decided to leave the Cavs is because another really cool opportunity presented itself. I was asked to join the applied analytics team at Legendary Entertainment, and that was in 2014. And it's interesting that you bring up that 2014 year, where our goal was to revolutionize the film and TV industry and help those studio execs understand how data can help make their marketing spend more effective for film and TV, as well as how data can help inform their various content strategy decisions. And I thought that sounded like a really cool opportunity, and decided to pack up my bags, leave Cleveland, move to LA, and venture off and do that.
And yesterday I told you that it's so funny that I'm a big basketball fan and you work for the Cavs, then I'm also actually happen to be like a huge Legendary fan. So
Love
uh,
it.
yeah, and when I saw that that was part of your experience, I was looking forward to asking all kinds of questions around it. And I think yesterday we touched on an interesting distinction or nuance of analytics in that space for film production and studios. So I mean, think about how organizations leverage data. Let's say if they know what a big fan I am, because they know that on YouTube I'm watching 3 hour long Zack Snyder director interviews, right? Then they would find a specific way to target me and to cater to me and advertise to me, because they know my engagement level.
That's right. But
But
that's a new concept.
yeah, yeah, right. It's personalization, but I also understand that because these studios do not necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong here, right? But do not necessarily only like market to consumers directly, but it's a more complex landscape, right? They also leverage data in a more strategic way, which has to do with, understanding audiences and how that affects what they will invest into and what kind of projects and productions they will start, right? So can you paint a little bit of a picture of this, of how data-driven ways of working actually look like in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's such a loaded question. But if I was to kind of narrow in on the two main areas where I see data and analytics being used within the film and TV industry, it would be for marketing as well as for content strategy. So on the marketing side, I'm trying to think. Let's say, for example, I think it'll be easier to talk through an example. So the
Sure.
F1 movie comes out today. It's top of mind for me because my fiance is a big F1 fan and I'm becoming an F1 fan. So when
It's
you're
coming out
thinking about,
today.
yeah, this today or this weekend, it's coming out very
Oh,
soon.
cool. Now, I definitely wanted to check that one out. It's a good reminder.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it as well. So, if I take that movie, for example, I have no association with F1. I'm just using it, F1, the movie, just using it as an example. So, if I take that as an example and we think about the F1 film and we're trying to market this film and get this out to various people who might want to go to the box office to purchase tickets to see this film. Traditionally, back in 2014, when I was working in that space, the way that marketers thought about getting that message out was this four quadrant system where they would segment the population based on if you're male or female, or if you're under 25 or over 25. So if I am a marketing exec, F1 is a very male dominated industry. It's also very like affluent. So I would probably say that we're trying to tackle that quadrant of males over 25, for example. So at that time, they would just target people who were males over 25, and that was it. And what we were doing, and legendary at the time, and what people are starting to do nowadays that we have data and we're being more creative about, is we're figuring out, okay, instead of just thinking about males over 25, how about we think about how do we target males who are specifically interested in F1, or people who are specifically interested in F1? How about we think about targeting folks who are interested in adjacent sports such as motocross or MotoGP? So it's more so thinking about the themes within the content that you're trying to market, and the behaviors of, and looking at the behaviors of the customers that could help you identify those people who could be interested in it. So similar to what you were talking about on YouTube and you watching similar videos, how about we target those people who are watching F1 videos on YouTube? So those are the type of ways we started to introduce using data to help market films, compared to how it was done in the past, where it was really just like the spray and pray method. Let's target all males 25 and over. They could be NFL football fans. They could have never heard of F1 before. We're just going to target them. So that's kind of the concept that we were trying to shift people out of, is like, there's an opportunity to be more targeted and more efficient with their marketing spend. And then on the other end of it is more the content strategy side. So for example, if I keep going into the F1 movie, it would be something like, okay, how do we determine which talent to cast in here? So there might be different like surveys done, research on social media, at various analyses, just to understand which which actors might appeal in the film. There might be research done related to like which like car makers you might want to include. So a lot of like the various creative decisions are used. The data is used for that. It's also used in regards to, should we even greenlight this film or not? So is there enough interest in F1 for me to want to dedicate millions of dollars to create this film? So those are the things that studio execs are thinking about, and there's opportunities to use data to inform those decisions, where like traditionally years and years ago, data wasn't really used to inform those decisions. And again, I don't know if that was done with F1 specifically, but broadly speaking with films and TV shows as well, those are the thought process that go into it.
So I'm so glad we're having this conversation today, because I know that yesterday we touched on it, but I think you really brought it to life with the F1 example. So a bunch of dots just connected in my mind too. It's awesome. And I personally am just super interested in movie production, and especially the director's perspective, right? So you conceive of a story and then you basically pitch that idea to a studio and you try to make it happen. It's really just, I remember watching this interview with Martin Scorsese, and he says that, okay, basically being a director is being that project manager of, this is the idea and we need to bring it to life. And it's not just about, running the camera and making sure that the shot is right. It's just like a small piece of it. So Now I'm wondering also that in this whole process of movie making, whether also directors now need to basically understand how this data-driven process works behind the scenes and then learn to work with the studios, right? And I imagine that there are a bunch of movies that will be like designer movies, which is just based on, okay, exactly for that audience, we're going to get exactly these types of actors and exactly this type of story, right? But then also there's this fine line between the science and the art of it. So this is really
For
cool.
sure. Yeah, it's
And
interesting because, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's interesting because it is a balance between art and science. And on the studio side, when we have content coming to us, we have to think about, is this a good fit for the audience that we want to attract to our network or to our platform? And on the director side, they need to be thinking about, should I be pitching my content to this particular studio because I know that they're interested in building their brand within this particular audience. So it's really informative on both sides.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's interesting because when I look at these, I've just also watched a couple of weeks ago, like a Quentin Tarantino interview about how he used to be like very, very specific about, hey, this is the story, these are the characters, and he was just not really collaborating with the studios on, any ideas to change that. He said, hey, look, this is the idea, you either want it or not, right? And it served him well. But the entire field is evolving, though. Films are not made how they used to be made, right? So the production times are much smaller. Actually, budgets, funnily enough, are getting smaller but maybe you can correct me, but this is my understanding too, that, let's say 20 years ago, you could shot Lord of the Rings trilogy over 7 years with I don't know how many tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, but then if you had to do it today, you actually couldn't do it that way anymore, right? So there's just a lot more that now goes into the preparation of it and the conceptualization of it, and it's just faster. So being able to rely on data to make the right decisions in that fast moving landscape seems to be indispensable now for everyone, including movie makers. So this is awesome. And so after Legendary, now you had a bunch of experience working with a cool organization like the Cavs in sports and then now movies. So what was your next stage and what was the next challenge for you?
Yeah, so after that, I went to AT&T, and role was not as exciting or buzzy as the Cavs or in Legendary. But at that time, I felt like I just needed a reset in my career. Legendary was a lot of fun, but it was also like a lot of work, and I felt like I just wanted to have a quick reset. And I ended up joining AT&T, and in my role there, I was focused on still on customer segmentation and more so on how do we retain our customers at AT&T. And at that time, I was focused on like multiple products. So like the DirecTV business, the cell phone business, the landline business, and so on. But it was really all about like, how do we identify the customers who are worthy of receiving retention offers to keep them on our service longer. So if you think back to your own personal experiences, you'll have like this year-long contract with XYZ telecom company or XYZ cable company, and then your price goes up, and then you call and you complain, you say, hey, like, I don't think this is worth me paying X number of dollars anymore. My team was responsible for helping to determine which customers were worthy of an offer, because a lot of times the next thing they'll say is, oh, wait a second, we'll give you X dollars off for a year if you decide to stay with us. That offer price could change depending on how valuable you're seen to the organization. And this is something that happens just widely across various industries. So we were responsible for like looking at a customer's customer lifetime value to determine, what it would take to keep them on the platform.
Okay, gotcha. And then actually with AT&T as well, like what was, from your perspective, what is the biggest challenge for a company like AT&T when it comes to customer retention specifically? Because I know that is the name of the game. What did you see as the biggest challenge, and how did data really help from your experience?
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, a lot of the business I was focused on at the time was DirecTV, and the cable companies in general are going through this era where streaming is on the upswing and pay TV, cable TV is on the downswing. So I think the biggest challenge is the challenge that all of these various cable companies are experiencing right now is like, how do we keep customers on the platform with streaming becoming the thing?
Okay, got it. And this kind of leads us to the streaming conversation, right? Because that was a massive change that happened in the past 10 years. Especially, I think it always happens to be like one company that you associate with something, right? So let's say the smartphone we associate with Apple, even though Microsoft and Sony rolled out smartphones way before that, is just they did not have the right packaging. It wasn't the right moment. It was Steve Jobs on stage saying that a phone, a web navigator, and a music player device. Are you getting it? Right? And then that was the birth of the iPhone. I think with streaming, a lot of times we associate it with Netflix specifically, right? It's like, okay,
Yep.
streaming, Netflix, but then that was the big shift. And interestingly enough, there can be an argument made that Netflix is a data company. That's ultimately what the business model is about, understanding data and leveraging that data to create customer engagement, more specifically, the amount of time each individual watches per month. I think that's their North Star metric. I think that's specifically it. I might be wrong though, but something along those lines. So with streaming, I guess your next journey or your next challenge was at NBC Universal, right? So when you joined, what was your mandate and how did your career develop during your time there?
Yeah, so when I first joined NBC Universal, I was hired to help or be one of the first members of a team that was focusing on getting data across the various business units within NBC Universal. So the theme parks business, the film business, the sports division, the news division, the TV division. How do we get all of that information about our customers into a singular customer data platform for the efforts of, informing marketing strategy and learning more about our customers and helping the organization to think about how we can collectively learn more about how individual folks are engaging with various units within our organization. A lot of times, organizations focus on like my particular business unit, but there's a lot of power in acknowledging the fact that, oh, I, Mikel, could be going to the theme park and watching Universal film and watching Bravo content, for example. So we were really focusing on how do we get all that data into one place so the business to facilitate the businesses sharing data with each other.
Got it. And then basically with NBC Universal, so you ended up joining the Peacock team, right? And now you're VP of strategic analytics. So how did that transition go? And then what are you actually working on today?
Yeah, of course. So, as I mentioned, I was brought in to help bring all of these data pieces from various business units into one place. That positioned myself and others really well for the launch of Peacock. So, I was there for the launch of Peacock. So, like because of that, I was one of the first members of the data and analytics team there as well. And I was really focusing on, how can we get people within our NBC Universal ecosystem engaged with Peacock. And, in my current role, I'm really focusing on how do we drive growth for Peacock by better understanding our customers, and how do we drive growth for Peacock by teasing out and exploring various strategic initiatives that are innovative that can really set us apart from everyone else.
So I think this is the time when we arrive at your career playbook that we talked about before, right? And those key elements that you found to be super relevant to driving success across different roles that you had, right? So can you talk a little bit about that? What did you see as your keys to success and the main themes that you feel were, really formative during your career?
Yeah, of course. So I would say one key theme for me is just having the really cool opportunity to be a founding member or early member of analytics teams in various different industries. And that really helped me to learn how to establish and develop data-driven cultures, learning how to navigate stakeholders who may have been a little resistant because they didn't know what data is, or they don't know how it can be beneficial to driving their business forward or helping them achieve their goals. So I really had the opportunity to learn how to thread the needle between getting buy-in from various stakeholders and encouraging them to understand the value of data. So I feel like that's been really cool, just having the opportunity to develop these data-driven cultures. Another key theme in my career is understanding how to apply analytics in various different ways. So I've worked for a lot of different industries. I've also worked for a lot of different stakeholders. Even in my current role, a lot of the work I do is specifically for the executive leadership team, but also work very closely with various operational leaders, such as the product team or the content team or the marketing team. And the way that you think about crafting data and putting together deliverables and content for operational team can look very different than what you're providing for an executive. Executives really want that hard hitting, like what's the bottom line? What's the main point here? Making it clear and concise. Whereas a lot of times on the operations side, you're really focusing on like, how do you help them to optimize their current processes, and the way that you craft those narratives will look a little bit different. So to having the opportunity to just think about analytics in different ways has been really cool. And then, all of that ties together with stakeholder engagement and persuasion, and being able to convince stakeholders the importance of data, but doing it in a way where it's showing that you care about them. So I feel like I've received a lot of success through getting to know each of my stakeholders intimately and tailoring my approach to data and analytics in a way that works well for them. So like I just mentioned, how an executive might want insights is going to look different than an operational leader, but even within that, the thought process and the mindset of a marketer is very different than the thought process and the mindset of a product person. And even beyond those nuances, knowing that individual person, I have some stakeholders that really love getting into the data. So they hate when I give them decks. They rather me just give them an Excel. And sometimes I have to give them a deck because I'm like, you have to know this additional context. There are other, when it's stuff for executives, sometimes it's just me slacking a couple bullets because I know they just need a top line read. There's other times where I have to put together a deck and kind of walk them through, the why behind we're doing this analysis and what we're trying to achieve here. So I feel like knowing each individual stakeholder is really, really important. Another key part about stakeholder engagement is showing that you are valuable within the organization through being a connector. So I also prioritize a lot of getting to know various people within the organization, even folks I don't work with directly, just getting time with them, understanding what their goals are, what their priorities are, things that they're interested in. And by me having those conversations, it's easy for me to be like, oh, I just had a conversation with another person who's working on something similar, and I bring them together. So it's not just about having you in the center of the conversation the whole time. Stakeholders really value knowing that you're just someone who knows a lot of people and knows a lot of stuff. So even if I don't know something, I'll typically know the person who can has that information, or I'll figure it out. So I think part of, persuading stakeholders and stakeholder engagement is really about showing your value in a multitude of ways.
And also, I mentioned it to you that when you joined our masterclass in Nashville with other leaders in major organizations, and you had a bunch of cool insights. That was actually one of the reasons why I definitely wanted to have this conversation with you. Was highly requested from the community members, but also a lot of people mentioned that your questions really drove the conversation to interesting avenues, right? So you kind of had that ability to just very openly and honestly, in an authentic way, ask very intelligent questions. And that seems to be, from my experience, one of the secret weapons of the most successful leaders, the ability to ask the right questions. And it's actually also one of the most powerful relationship building tools, to be able to ask another person the right questions that will both build your relationship, but also uncover things that will inform both of you and just generate value in and of themselves, right? Inherent value
Totally.
creation to questions, right? So I mentioned the data-driven cultures and, the part about buy-in as well. What do you think is actually the main blocker usually for real buy-in beyond, lip service buy-in in large organization? What are the key blockers for that from your perspective?
Yeah, I feel like the biggest challenge I've had with infusing data into organizations is running into stakeholders who feel like the traditional ways that they operate is sufficient, and being like not eager to understand how data can actually complement what they're doing. And depending on how you decide to approach the stakeholder, it come across like, hey, I'm not doing my job the right way because you're trying to force this data onto me. And I feel like it's really important to know that you're communicating to the stakeholder in a way that helps them understand, hey, this is complementary to what you're doing. This is meant to enhance what you're doing. This is meant to optimize what you're doing. But I feel like having those conversations initially in the right way and steering them towards, hey, like, I know what you're doing right now is okay, but using data will make it even better and make your life easier. I feel like that's the challenge, is having that initial conversation sometimes for those folks who are resistant to data because they don't quite understand it, or because they feel like what they're doing is just fine.
And it's funny that we're kind of coming full circle in the conversation. In the beginning, we talked about AI and how that's shaking things up, but I see so many parallels between what's happening now also with AI, right?
Yep.
That it's not to replace what you're doing, because actually AI is not the best at replacing things specifically, right? So where it really shines is complementing what humans are already good at and making them even better at it and helping them to do that job faster and better and at a lower cost as well. And I'm not saying there are no examples of, AI eliminating certain areas, but I think in the grand scheme of things, people ignore how many jobs it will also create with that,
Totally
right?
agree.
And so this is really cool. And Mikel, look, I really enjoyed this conversation, and it was a pleasure. It always is to have these. I think we could have a third and fourth round as well, and just still uncover more. But it was a pleasure to have you on the show, and we look forward to working with you in the community.
Thank you so much for having me. I totally enjoyed our conversation, and I really love the Data Storytellers organization. Nashville was awesome, and I'm looking forward to staying connected to the community.
Absolutely, and we love to have you. Until next time.
All right.